All right. Welcome, Tiffany and Mo, to Queerly Beloved. So happy to have you on the show today. How are you?
Thank you
We're
so
good.
much for having
Thank
us.
you. We're excited.
Right on. Yeah, it's been such a delight already getting to know you both, and I'm excited to drop in further. So, as I mentioned before we hit record, my opening question is to tell me who you are, but to tell me in this moment, who you are in this moment in particular, in this part of your life, on this day. But tell me by describing a drag avatar that embodies that. And as I mentioned, I can go first to give you guys a second to think about it.
Hmm.
So let's see. Often I find inspiration from what I'm already wearing because I feel like when I'm dressing myself, I am tuning into that. Like, who am I today? And I'm kind of like finding
Mm.
stuff that is going to help express that and help me connect
Hmm.
more with that. And so today I felt really drawn to this light blue cashmere sweater, and so I am feeling like this softness in my heart and in my presence, and sort of feeling into the vibes of the cozy winter time, the holiday
Hmm.
season. I was telling you all that I'm going to be hanging out with my nephew this afternoon, and there's something so cozy and sweet about that. And so my drag avatar is like this cozy fairy princess. She's like,
I love
she's
Mm.
it.
just like so sweet, and she's always, kind of ready to just lie on a soft pillow and just kind of like be there with you and kind of like perch up. And she is wearing cashmere, in this case it's like a cashmere dress, so it goes all the way down to her ankles. And she's like barefoot with beautiful like light blue nail polish, and just super sweet. And when she comes into the room, she just makes people feel warm.
Mm.
So that's the drag avatar that represents
Mm.
me right now.
Love it.
Love, love.
All right, which of you is ready
Beautiful.
to go?
You ready to go?
So I will go. So this morning I actually was recorded a podcast all about maternal health. And
Hmm.
so I am a doula, in outside of being a podcast host. And so my drag avatar today feels like what I call an earth mother goddess. And
Mm.
so it's very much not in traditional white today. So she might be wearing some bright pink and some bright green,
Mm-hmm.
but very much in flow with earth and nature and spirits. I
Mm.
am wearing my amethyst. Uh, it's in the shape of a pregnant person. And
Wow.
so I am wearing that today. And so I'm feeling love and light
Mm.
and connection to creativity and birth. So it's
Mm.
giving a bright pink and green earth mother goddess.
Mm-hmm. I'm feeling her. Yes, thank you.
These were so good. I'm like judging mine
No
internally.
pressure. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah. So, hi everybody. I'm Mo Ari. I am here with my lovely wife Tiffany. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and currently the love and connection expert at Hinge. So, a lot of the work I do is around helping people to build lasting partnerships and really connect with love in a way that's authentic to them.
Mm.
uh, in that journey, I found that it's a real healing journey. So if I was tapping into my drag persona today, I think it's something like a shadow queen, not shade queen. Those are two different things.
Mm.
Shadow queen, shadow warrior. I
Mm.
think for me, a lot of my journey was having to go into spaces that I didn't really want to go, spaces inside of myself or spaces externally, in order
Mhm.
to understand myself better. So I'm really connected to that today.
Mm.
These shadow spaces in my story that brought me pain, but also taught me so much about my gifts and my authenticity, or the
Mm.
spaces in my life that maybe have challenged me or brought me a significant amount of grief, but
Mm.
also broke my heart wide open to receive even more love. So I think the shadow is this necessary space that I kind of dance in or delight in. It's not really scary. It's just like the unconscious or what is hidden. And I like to invite people into that space in my work. And I definitely say in our relationship, I do that. So that everything comes into the light so that there is not this need to hide and that we get to fully be seen so that we can be loved unconditionally. So I'd say I'm like the shadow queen.
Yes. Not a shade queen, a shadow queen. Important distinction. Yeah, I love that. And it's interesting. You know, I started off saying that mine was a little inspired by my light blue cashmere sweater that I'm wearing today. And then Tiffany, we had your hot pink and bright green pop-in Earth Mother Goddess, which you've got that beautiful sweater on today. And then I see for you, Mo, you've got this black and white sweater going, you know, which I see in that this shadow and light, you know, and the way that those two get to dance together. And I do feel like there is power in, rather than being in fear of shadow and feeling like that is something we need to resist and hide from, it's like, how can we embody the shadow slayer, the shadow queen that is ready to move through it and to face it and to, in facing it, illuminate and welcome the light. So there's something really powerful about that.
Thank you for reflecting that back to me.
It is.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just last night, I had a dream that was very much inviting me into some potential shadow and into the unknown, where a Black Panther, a jaguar, appeared. And I had prayed the night before, which is not something I typically do, or this particular prayer, praying for guides to show up in my dream space. And this jaguar shows up, and I was like, okay,
totally a guide.
And this jaguar was fierce, and I was scared of it at first, but then I gave it some food, and it was kind of like started to cuddle with me and receive like pets from me. But then I was like, okay, this is nice, but I think I'm ready to go. It feels a little dangerous. And then it did that thing that like a mama dog or cat does, where it kind of like grabs part of your skin without piercing, and it just grabbed my skin and was like, no, you're staying here, you're staying with me. And the invitation for me was to recognize that the power and the value of being in that shadow space, being in that unknown space, and that yes, it could be a little, it can be scary, and there's value in it. And so I just stayed with the jaguar, and then like it released me, and I was able to pet it and cuddle it a little bit, and then it turned into another animal, and then I left. And so it's interesting, these themes coming up.
Wow.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the space to share that. So
that's beautiful.
Let's play with both of these introductions. And I think, you know, since Tiffany, you started and you were really calling in this Mother Earth doula, Earth goddess woman. I'd love to hear more about your work as a doula, postpartum doula, right? And what that work means to you from a spiritual perspective.
Good question.
Really great question. So I believe that birthing, maternal and perinatal health is one of the most beautiful processes. And I think that it's extremely spiritual. And I think in a lot of contexts, the spiritual nature of it gets lost. And so my work as a postpartum doula, particularly in my practice, is to connect birthing people to that spiritual connection. That includes grounding, that includes meditation, that includes creating and subscribing to rituals that resonate with you, whether that's in the delivery room or whether that's after the fact or whether that's throughout the pregnancy. And so because I believe that birthing is like one of the greatest rites of passage of all time, I believe that birthing people are portals for life. So they're portals to bring these beings from spiritual world into this world. And so I think that there's a real sacred nature to that process, to people that carry, to people that are parents, to people that are a part of that tribe. And so in
Mm,
my work, I really try to press upon people how beautiful and important it is that babies are born, but in that process, mothers are born, fathers are
mm,
born, parents are born, community, tribe, aunts, uncles, like so many
mm,
people are born and birthed through
That's
that
a word.
process.
That's a word.
mhm,
And so much of that process is spiritual. It's like a lot of times there's no words to explain it. There's the
mm,
intuition that guides us. There is, our ancestors' wisdom that guides us. And
mm,
I think we've gotten so far away from that. And so
mhm,
my work is to educate on some of these practices and traditions, encourage people to feel empowered and to connect to their own intuition. And
mhm,
simply put, like, as a new mom, as a new parent, you are the best person for the job. Lean into your intuition, lean
mhm,
into what you know, and be guided by that. And so
mm.
that's my work in a nutshell, but really the educating and the belief that it is a spiritual process and we have to surrender to it in order to, in my opinion, in order to make the best of that experience.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
beautiful. Wow. Yeah, I got chills
Yeah.
just hearing that. I've never really considered that when a child is born, it isn't just a rite of passage for the parents and the child, but
Mm-hmm.
for everyone, right? That
Yeah.
Yeah.
that an uncle is born in that
Yeah.
process, a
Yeah.
grandfather is
Yeah.
born in that process,
Yes.
that this
Yeah.
great transformation happens for everyone who is connected with
Mm-hmm.
this child, this new
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
being.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's such a beautiful piece to recognize that this child brings this gift of transformation, this gift
Mhm.
of
Exactly.
a passageway into something new for everybody, for the
Mm-hmm.
community, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
That's so
Mm-hmm.
powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I'm sitting with that. Like, I just love that you said that. I don't know if you've said that in this way before. So
Mm-mm.
I'm like, okay, making a mental note
Mm,
to write that down later. It's powerful. I
so
know how,
powerful.
yeah.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, as I became a mom, I started birthing the Empress Within. And so a lot of
Mm,
it surrounds this work is that as I became a mother, as I birthed Nova into the
mhm.
world, Tiffany was born as well, a different version of me, and I called her
Yes.
Empress. And so she
Mm,
was born through that process. So I had to like take care of her, nurture her, feed her,
mm,
nurse her, like do all of the things that I was doing for Nova and that the people around me were doing for Nova. And so I'm recognizing that so many different things and people are birthed through the birthing
mhm,
process, even not just the baby. And so I think
mhm,
that's where my work is right now, just
mm.
illuminating that to people.
Hmm.
Beautiful. That
Mm-hmm.
illumination feels so important and
Mm-hmm.
valuable. And in
Mm-hmm.
illuminating it, in acknowledging it, and honoring it, we're able to step into it more fully. We're able
Mm-hmm.
to be with it in a more intentional, more
Mm-hmm.
mindful, more powerful way. And I
Mm-hmm.
see that as a parallel to your acknowledgement that birthing and parenting is a spiritual process, a spiritual
Yes.
journey.
Mm-hmm.
And it is spiritual no matter what, right? In my
Mm-hmm.
opinion, whether we call it spiritual or not, it's spiritual. So for the most, staunch atheist, it's still spiritual. And when we acknowledge it as spiritual, we give it power in the spirit
Yes.
realm. And in so
Yes.
doing, we're able to receive more of the support and blessings and
Mm-hmm.
guidance and love from the
Mm-hmm.
spirit realm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I was kind of tapping into as you were
Mm-hmm.
saying, how
Absolutely.
you bring that into the light. And
Mm-hmm.
in so doing, the parents are able to receive the support that can come
Yeah.
from that acknowledgement.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Mm.
Powerful work. Yeah, I'm curious, what helps you in that work? What helps you be a grounded earth mother goddess that's able to support some of the, I'm sure, so many fears and shadows that are illuminated sometimes
Yeah.
through the process?
Yeah, I think the surrender is a big part of it. And
Mm,
so in the moments that I've noticed I've resisted doing the shadow work that I can sometimes be afraid of,
Mm,
I am called back into that work. And so, in my own process of being a mother, I had to do things like examine my own relationship with my mother, or examine
mm,
relationships with other people in my life that might encourage or prevent how I showed up as a mother. And so
mm,
having to go to the depths of potential pain or those
mhm,
experiences, come face to face with my own grief. Um,
mm,
and in a daily, more practical way, I think it's finding ways to ground so that I
mhm,
am showing up as the best version of myself,
mhm,
so that I can support other people. And so I think that's constantly evolving. It's one that I have to choose to do every single day,
mm,
because it can be very ungrounding at times. And so I think
mhm,
it's being creative about what that looks like. If that's taking a walk, if that's journaling, if it's waking up at 5 a.m., just
mm.
trying to find ways to do that on a daily basis. And then more big picture in general, it's like surrendering to the process.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense that
Mm-hmm.
grounding is such an important piece to it. And
Mm-hmm.
especially as we consider that the birth process is giving birth to so many new transformations, so many rites of
Mm-hmm.
passage,
Mm-hmm.
there's uncertainty that comes with every rite of passage,
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty that
Yeah.
comes with every piece of transformation. So when we
Mm-hmm.
think about it on this ripple effect way, that's a lot of uncertainty. And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
more grounded that everyone in that process can
Mm-hmm.
be, the more we're able to hold that up. And of course,
Exactly.
you being sort of the one of the pillars, or the pillar
Yeah.
that is holding that space is beautiful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It is. Thank you so much for mirroring that back.
Yeah, yeah, my pleasure. It's an honor. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Mo, why don't we move to some of your shadow stuff since we just tapped into Tiffany's. I'm curious to hear, as the shadow slayer, what has served you, or actually, why don't we start with some of the shadows that you can recognize you've moved through, or some of the ones that are mm, your most fierce
Mm.
um competitors,
Yes.
or let's call it dance partners
Yeah.
in this new paradigm.
Yeah. So interesting. I think one, I love that you started us out with where we are in space and time now,
Mm,
because I think there's just power to like the present moment. And
mm,
a lot of times when I wanted to approach this shadow work, I was
mm,
thinking past, like I'm
mhm.
going into the past, and
Sure.
and I think it can be disconnecting from it can that kind of thinking could disconnect me from how um, the shadow is showing up in the present moment. So it's really important to stay
Mm,
present in that work. That was one of my biggest lessons, that I'm not
mm,
always just looking at some childhood stuff. There are
mhm,
many ways in which these things are showing up now. So
mm,
whether you figure out the root of that thing or where that thing started, not necessarily necessary. Some people don't have memories of the traumas that they experience, but what's happening in the present moment, and it's not aligned with how you're trying to live your life. So there were many moments where I was realizing throughout my journey that I had some type of traumatic experiences that were showing up and impacting my present moment. So I'll say
mhm,
that I
mhm,
have some quite a few significant experiences of trauma that I had to like deal with throughout the
mhm,
past, I would say 10 to 15 years.
mm,
And then how it was showing up in my present moment, how it was impacting my ability to connect with other people, how that
mm,
might be impacting the anxiety or fears I had, or my fears around being seen or very visible to people. So I'll say
mm,
that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've gone through the journey of gender transition. I'll say most people say they're always in transition. I would
mm,
say that to varying degrees. We're kind of like
mhm,
always on the move somewhere. But in terms of gender transition, I've done a lot of the medical process around
mhm,
it looks different for different people. But for myself, I'm pretty content with where I am in that process. But I would say that brought up a lot of grief So much of my life being lived as a person assigned female at birth and being socialized in that way, and then making the decision to begin gender transition in my 20s, it radically changed how people were interacting with me. They weren't seeing like a woman getting on the elevator. They're now seeing this Black man. So, you know, I'm starting to interface with systems of power and oppression that I hadn't been experiencing prior to that. So getting stopped by the police was not really a thing when I was cute wearing mini skirts in my 20s, but like getting stopped now raises a level of fear inside of me, or suspicion, that I had to like reckon with. There were so many moments in my gender transition where I realized, oh, there's this grief setting in. And I think grief has probably been one of the largest shadows I've had to contend with, because I have this tendency to stuff things down and not want to deal with it. But there's been quite a bit of pain I've had to sit with. And then that pain also being invitations or opportunities for me to realize, oh, you want more connection. Oh, you actually do need support in ways that you think you don't. So I tried to sit with the pain and understand from the pain what it's trying to tell me, but it wasn't my initial inclination to do that. I just learned it along the way. So I would say that that's like the brief overall, as brief as I could be about that.
Yeah, so beautiful. And it's interesting as we shifted the paradigm of the shadow you want to slay to the shadow to dance with. It can be a similar shift with our, you know, seemingly negative emotions of grief, of pain, that rather than wanting to push them away or kill them, it's like, what can I learn from them? Like, how can I be with you in a more loving way, and give you space to teach me what I'm meant to learn in this experience, and ultimately, yes, to be released, right? To release and heal that part of you. And I know from my experience, more recently, I sometimes experience grief in these waves that come unexpectedly. And in the past, it's been more like, oh, I'm sad because of blank. And now it's like, I sometimes just feel sad, and it's like, oh, I need to go feel sad, and I go feel sad, and I have like a playlist that I use that'll help me like move it, you know, and I just let the sadness move, right? I think I like to think of emotion as energy in motion, and so it's my job sometimes just to give it the space to move, for that energy to move. But yeah, it's so important to be in good relationship with grief.
And I think that that's what you just said is so powerful, that good relationship with it. I think it's often so, when we think about the life cycle, it's easy. Some might say, I won't say Tiffany wouldn't say, some might say that it's easy to think about birth as in like life. But when we think about grief, we think about loss, so we think about death. So it's easy to be in the birthing process of something new is emerging, that springtime in life, like, oh, there's something that is forming, there's something being created. When there are things that are passing away, there are things that no longer serve you, that you have to release from your life. There are people physically passing away, whatever grief, whatever form grief takes. That is the hard part to contend with. But like you said, getting good with our relationship to the whole of that life cycle, that's what I think it significantly changed my reality, because I realized, just as Tiffany was talking about birthing myself as a father in the process of us having our first child, I was also kind of birthing myself as a transgender person. So my identity was shifting kind of in a parallel. And so there were many creation processes happening, but there is so much grief even in the birth process.
Oh my gosh,
you're no longer a single person. You're no longer like a couple. Now we're like a family. Like, what? That's grief. Like, we don't go out on Friday nights in the same way we used to.
That's real. And it's such an interesting dichotomy, because it feels like, oh yeah, but it's a happy thing. Yes, it's a happy thing, and there's something sad too. And it doesn't mean that this was better and I should have done this. it's like, yes, this is the direction I want to move in, and there's still sadness that I'm letting go of this.
Exactly.
And even with the
Yeah.
things that, even my relationship with alcohol has changed a lot in the last year, and
Yeah.
there I feel great that I consume less alcohol and I'm more mindful
Yeah.
with it. Right now I'm not consuming any, but there's a part of me that's like sad for the part of me that really enjoyed the alcohol version of Will,
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
okay to feel that.
Mhm.
It's okay to
Mhm.
Yeah.
recognize that there's
Mhm.
sadness anytime we lose something, even if
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
for our greatest and highest good,
Yep.
Mm.
and that we can be with both of those things at the same time,
Mhm.
the joy of what's new, while we're
Yeah.
also holding the sadness of what is lost.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And they both can exist in the present. To your like
Yes.
earlier point, I think that's been one of my greatest lessons. It's not like those Friday nights dancing were just in the past. That
Mhm.
memory and that feeling is alive inside of me. That's why I feel the grief,
Mm,
because grief
mm,
really is this call toward gratitude. I am
mhm,
happy for those moments I
Mhm.
experienced that, but I'm not
mm,
allowing myself to feel the happiness because I am telling myself, no, in order to be present and to be happy about your child, you cannot be feeling gratitude for those
Mhm.
party Friday nights.
Mhm.
sure. Mm,
So
Mhm.
so what you're saying, getting good with grief, for me, that has looked like allowing myself allowing memory to exist in the present moment. So
Mhm.
not like
mm.
this imagination of the past.
Oh,
Like those
yes.
Friday nights are right here in this moment with me, right
Mhm.
Yes.
in my heart. And I get
Mhm.
to have that. And I get to
Yes.
enjoy dancing around my living room with my daughter on a Friday.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. And then we don't have to feel this sense of longing or loss for what was in the past. It's like, no,
Yeah.
that's still here. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yes. And I,
Yeah.
I I was just gonna add that I think
Yeah.
so much of getting good with grief is getting good with joy.
Hmm.
Because oftentimes I know I've experienced the feelings of great joy, and then I'm sitting with a friend who's experiencing great grief, right? And I'm like,
Hmm.
well, how can I be in my joy if they're experiencing this level of sadness and loss? And I think it's honoring their grief, also
Hmm.
honoring my joy. But if I am not able to honor the joy I might be feeling sitting with my friend, or even the duality that might be inside of me, I'm never going to be
Hmm.
able to fully have a relationship with grief that will serve my highest good. That's one of the greatest lessons I've
Hmm.
learned. Like, if I shut out this grief, I'm also shutting out this pleasure and this joy. And so I have to get
Hmm.
good with both of them.
Yeah, because they're
Hmm.
like this from that, like you're getting at this what we were talking about, the light and shadow like
Uh-huh.
coexisting. It's
Yeah.
like you can't, first of all, you can't have shadows without the light. Like,
Mhm.
so if we spotlight a light on us right now, there'd be a big shadow on the
Mhm.
wall. It's like
Yep.
it's because of what you're talking about that joy is what is being activated to cause the grief.
Yes.
We know we are
Hmm.
so happy because of our experiences of what was,
Mhm.
that we're feeling grief about the potential loss. But the
Yeah.
truth is that we haven't
Hmm.
lost it.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It's just, it's only changed in form.
Inform. Mhm.
Yes. Ooh, so good.
Okay,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be quiet because I could
No,
just
it's
go
so
on,
good. I
but
love
I
it.
really loved what you were saying about
Mm,
getting good with grief.
Yep.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've got our podcast episode title. So, moving back to your story of transition, I'd love for
Mhm.
you, as I asked Tiffany about seeing it through a spiritual lens, I'd love about seeing being a doula through that lens. I'd love for
Mhm.
you to share a little bit about how that is for you to look at your transition period through a spiritual lens, perhaps
Mhm.
also noting how spirit served you through that transition, if
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was part of your experience.
Mhm.
Yeah. You know, it was important for me to accept that my physical embodiment is one thing
Mm,
and who I am as a soul being something separate.
mm,
They're
mm,
together, working together in this lifetime, but this
Mhm.
physical
mhm,
embodiment is not me. It
mhm.
is the vessel for which I do the work. And
Yep.
so I think when I am facing criticism or bullying online, or somebody is like, I don't agree with this or that, they're not talking about me. They're talking about something that's like, they're talking about my physical form, and that's very different than who I am as a soul or an entity.
Yes.
So I had to get really good with my own relationship to myself to understand the work that I came here to do, why it's been important for me to be transgender in this lifetime. And I still think I'm working out my philosophy on that. I don't like to offer people they have to go on their own journey of figuring out what that means for them. But for me, being transgender has been about encouraging people to see me beyond my physical form.
Yes.
I think sometimes these categories like man, woman prevent people from seeing someone beyond that body. We see somebody with a vagina, for instance, and we say, well, you should only be able to make this money, this much money. You should not really have rights over your body. Up until a certain period of time, women couldn't have bank accounts. Like this has gone on since the beginning of time. If you don't have a vagina, then you get to run corporations and you should be the head of the household and onward. And I think sometimes that a lot of the time it's prevented people from seeing an individual's real capacity, their real gifts, their real inspirations and talents. I'll tell a really short story.
Yeah.
I'm done. I will be quiet.
You're great.
Our daughter has been pretty obsessed with becoming a doctor. And so she's been asking for like doctor's kits and things like that. So her grandparents, being grandparents, we're like, okay, we're getting her a doctor's kit. So the doctor's kit arrives, and it's actually on the box that says nurse's kit. But we know she loves pink, so we ordered the pink. They ordered the pink one, but they were like, we thought it was gonna be a doctor's kit. The pink one is a nurse's kit. So they were like, well, which one was the doctor's kit? Of course, it's the blue one.
Come on.
It has surgery tools in it. It has everything to become an open heart surgeon. And the nurse's kit has like the thermometer and the stethoscope things. And there's nothing wrong with being a nurse. It was just that my daughter wanted to be a doctor. So she heard us talking about how it said nurse, and she starts saying Nurse Nova after she'd been saying Dr. Nova all week. And we're like, no. So we put new names on everything, and we put pictures of women doctors. And
nice.
Tried to correct this, but this is an example of how society and how it's structured sometimes prevents us from being able to see the soul of a person, their gifts. She wants to be a doctor, and she's telling us my gifts are, or my inclinations are this. We shouldn't deny her that. And I think that growing up as a woman, so much of my life was about limitations, what you couldn't do. I grew up with like 4 older brothers, and I wanted to be outside playing basketball with them, but girls are not supposed to do that. I wanted to be spitting outside because I saw them doing that. They're like, girls shouldn't do that. It's all about limitation, and it felt limiting to my soul. And I still think I'm coming out of those limitations still. I'm still trying to pass them. But yeah, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful point right there, is that you, and I'd say humans, most humans are always coming out of those limitations, right? And that when we're on this journey of spiritual expansion, that's what so much of this work is about, is that we have these limitations that have been placed on us from this physical realm with these social pressures to conform. And when we get closer to the truth and an expression of that truth, of who we are and how we are meant to show up in this world, that we have to slay those limitations. We have to keep moving past them so that our full light can be illuminated. It is, in my consideration, it's a lifelong journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
Absolutely.
And Nova, so yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, especially because of where we're starting from. This is, well, I think certainly in our generation, it's gonna be a lifelong journey. My hope is that one day the starting place is just so different.
Well, and we even see in the Nova story that your child has the added benefit of parents who are going to help slay those limitations for
Yeah.
her behalf, right? And that's such a
Yeah.
beautiful gift. And so, yeah, the more that folks are becoming conscious in a large scale, hopefully that's going to set our young people and the next generations up. So, like, sticking with the Nova theme, I was telling Tiffany that I saw the Instagram video of her receiving those cards, and I just my heart totally melted, and I fell in love with her in a 30-second Instagram reel. I loved when she was like, "Unique, that's my favorite one." I just love. I love your daughter, and I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts or stories to share about how raising her has taught you, what spiritual lessons or personal growth lessons you've derived from being with this beautiful being as she comes into her own.
Yes, we have thousands.
I don't even know
I'm
where to
letting
start.
Empress Tiffany start.
Oh my God. I think for me, she is like, first of all, she's amazing. And she's my kid, so I'm probably biased for saying that, but she is. She is the direct, she reminds me so much of, or she calls me into my own inner child. And not necessarily that she's like my mini me or my twin, but her being in her innocence, her joy, her laughter, calls me into, what was little Tiffany like, right? How would I have shown up in this way? And when I really sit and I'm intentional about those moments, I really do connect back to, that 5-year-old that was just wide-eyed and just amazed and inquisitive about everything. And watching her, particularly watching her interactions with my own parents, I'm like, wow, this is deeply healing.
Cool.
Wow, this is literally my inner child being called into, these lost parts of myself. I'm able to reconnect with play. You cannot have a 3-year-old without running more than you ever have in your life, getting down on the floor and just literally playing and being and having fun. Those trips to the children's museum where I probably would just want to sit on the bench and watch her play. I'm being called to like go into the ball pit and play with her. And I might be a little resistant, but then the moment I'm like, wow, that was so fun. Like I feel like a 3-year-old, and it's very it's grounding, it's very connecting. And marrying Mo was like one of the best days of my life. And being with Nova and like the smiles and the laughter that we have as a family with her present is like, oh my God. And if I keep talking about it, I'm probably going to start crying, but it's a very deeply like connecting experience to my own inner child and my play and joy that I think for a lot of adults gets lost. You feel like, oh, I'm a parent now, I got to be serious and I got to be responsible and I have to take care of them. But so much of that care is connecting to your inner child and connecting to play and connecting to fun. And so I would say that's one of the biggest lessons that I have learned, continue to learn on a daily basis with Nova. Even when I'm trying to put her down and she asked me like 15 questions before I had to walk out of the door, I'm like, okay, just, this was probably you. You probably asked 20 questions. So let's just sit here.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. Play is a huge part of my purpose in the world, is to invite more play in. And so, yeah, I love hearing that. There's a speech I gave once, a keynote for this gay men's retreat that was about children as our spiritual gurus. And I just touched on all these things that we can learn from them, from like play to self-expression, to speaking our needs. There's just so many ways that these kids, these little pure energies of light, they have got it right, and we can learn from them.
They do. Yeah, I call Nova my greatest teacher. I also call her love and motion.
My what was that?
I call her love in motion.
Oh, beautiful.
And then I call myself student of love. So like
Oh, so good.
she is, I just have to echo everything you said. I'm just gonna say ditto. Just that so much of this journey really is about learning, just learning. And it's interesting to, I always pushed back when we were pregnant with Nova. Well, you were pregnant. I was a bystander. And we were pregnant with Nova, and people would say, well, you know, you're about to have to teach her so much. And I would be like, she is going to teach me. I felt that. And then seeing her here, she really just does do that all of the time, call us into our higher selves. But literally, like, if you tell her something, she remembers. And so she watches everything that we do. And it's just caused me to be way more accountable with how I say things, my impulse reactions, following through on my word. I have to be extremely intentional because she's like watching and she's mirroring. And so people will say like there are these videos of her, she's taking photos of us, and she'll be like, "Aw, I love you," or "Aw." And people are like, she genuinely loves you all. And they're like, she's mirroring this affirmation because she gets that. So it just, yeah, she's just called me into a greater walk in terms of being love. I always feel like a part of why I'm here is to try to kick past these human limitations around love and be some type of embodiment of love. And I think we all have this capacity to do that. But she's like kind of pushing me to keep breaking past the barriers that want me to go like this. Some of the cringe factors, like when we don't want to be vulnerable and we just go like, she doesn't have that. She's gonna tell you I love you 3 times an hour. She's 3 times a minute probably. She's gonna ask for 10 hugs.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing about that. And yeah, so many blessings to Nova this season and in her lifetime. So yeah, speaking of coming up against those limitations, when you are called to be a beacon of love, one of the things I'm curious to hear more about is what your path was like moving from your Christian backgrounds into a connection to spirituality that's separate, I imagine, from the more traditional religious ideals.
I don't know if it's my astrology or our astrology. So like, I don't know if the stars aligned, but I kind of have always, even in my Christian journey, I remember being a young kid, and I'm the youngest of 6 children. My mother is a reverend of the Christian faith.
Oh, wow.
She's gone to divinity school. So Christianity was like really present in our home. I remember having conversations though with her about the mysticism of the church. So the water to wine thing, that's magic to me. Raising the dead, healing sick people. I'm like, this is very meta. This is spiritual. There is this mysticism beyond the ordinary that I think often people ignore in order to do this like very regimented religiosity thing. And so for me as a kid, I couldn't unsee it. So I was very zeroed in. So I remember having conversations with my mom, like, I've been here before. Or I was like, I'm not from here. Like, this is not my, I remember being like 7 and saying like, I am not from here. And she's like, you are not, in her very Christian way. She's like, you are not of this world. You are just in this world. Right.
Cool.
But for me as a kid, I was very much like in tune with that. So I don't know if that was like that. But I've carried that with me my entire life. This curiosity about spirituality that goes beyond religious tradition, but who I am as like a soul, and really wanting to understand that from an early age.
Yeah, so I grew up in the South Baptist Church, very traditional. My parents weren't necessarily like steeped into the traditional church. Very much in the South, though, you do it because everybody else does it, right? Like, we go to church, we go to Bible study, we're there maybe 3 times a week. And as I've gotten older, my dad is now a minister in the church. And as I began, you know, so much of my church family was my community in a small town. Like
Mhm.
you go to school with people, you go to church with people. So a lot of those people were people that were close to our families. And so as I grew into my own identity as a woman, as a queer person, I was
Mhm.
like, some of these lessons aren't adding up. Like some of the
Mhm.
things that you're saying are not adding up. I don't really feel this unconditional love that you're describing.
Mhm.
And so I was definitely that kid early on that would ask, like, what is this? Like, what is this reality that we're in? Where are we? And
Yeah.
I've come
Mm.
to learn that that was me trying to make sense of this world and realizing there's probably more. I don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
never really getting answers to it. We were often taught, you know, you don't question these things, they just are,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Mhm.
as I became more aware of my identity as Tiffany and as a queer person, I sought out my own journey of what
Mm.
spirituality meant to me, and it's evolving. It continues to evolve.
Mm.
I had to go on my own journey because I just believe that we are love,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
that's not what was always reflected to me. And so,
Mhm.
you know, Mo and I together have really explored a number of spiritual practices and
Mhm.
ways to ground and connect over the past couple years that have been totally life changing,
Mm.
and have evolved in so many different ways. And so I think early on, I always had this leaning to wanting to know more, wanting to get deeper, not really feeling like I
Mhm.
had the space to do so. And so in the moment where I'm in college, I'm like, oh, let me go explore all of this stuff. And so now I feel like
Mm.
I'm in a place in which I've done this on social media. I came out of the spiritual closet
Yes.
to say, you know, I was raised in the Baptist church and I very much am a very spiritual person, and I'm not going
Mhm.
to hide that anymore. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
I am not traditionally Christian. I still have a lot of the Christian traditions that are
Mhm.
very near and dear to my heart. And I really like this tradition too. And so
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I am just a spiritual
Yep.
being.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
Again, those labels kind of limit
Yeah.
our expansion into what
Mhm.
spirituality looks like for us.
Yeah.
Our
Mhm.
connection sometimes is limited,
Mhm.
or that flow of energy you talked about sometimes is
Mhm.
constricted by these labels and these
Mhm.
boxes.
Mhm.
Because
Mhm.
if you are saying you're a Christian, then people would not expect you to do any kind of like burning of sage in your
No.
home or any
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
ritual around
Mhm.
intention setting for the new
Mhm.
year.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so, or like even, there's this Pan-African practice of pouring libations for the ancestors. So you get a
Mhm.
plant that's living and you pour water into it. And
Mhm.
we do that at like really important moments throughout the year to honor our
Mm.
ancestors.
Mm.
This is something that's specific to the Black tradition.
Mm.
And you'd think that the Black church would also
Mm.
it's like they've adopted it, but we don't talk about where that really
Mhm.
comes from.
Got
We
Mhm.
it.
make it like it's a Christian thing. It's not.
Got it.
There's a lot
Interesting.
of overlap, I think,
Yeah.
especially for Black
Mm.
people, because we
Mhm.
have these very diasporic traditions from
Mhm.
across all of like African
Mhm.
traditions.
Mhm.
And we still incorporate them, but we don't talk about where
Yeah.
that practice came from. And we
Mhm.
we talked about
Mhm.
this really recently.
Mhm.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. And I think that it is so important for us spiritual and queer folks to come out of the spiritual closet
Yeah.
to model that it is okay and that it is
Mhm.
a valuable, beautiful thing to be both queer and spiritual, because so many
Mhm.
of our queer brothers and sisters and siblings are so damaged and hurt by
Yeah.
the oppressive system of some of the traditional religions that
Mhm.
they have rejected spirituality. And
That's
so
right.
I honor you both as people who are helping to hold light for the possibility of being queer and spiritual, and all the beauty that can come, all the blessings that can come in really embracing that and honoring that part of you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for saying that out loud. I
Yeah.
Mm.
think we are all so connected. The thing that changed my life, one day I want to say it was probably 2020. 2020 was a year, right? Like for everybody.
Right.
One day because we had started to work on a lot of these spiritual practices. I would say it's going on 5 years now, by the way. You said a couple years. I think it's been about five.
Yeah, it was
Like
like
2019.
pre-Nova.
So I'm sitting in my car and I just had this realization around our breath. I have been really sitting with the breath as a resource, why meditation is important, why breath is grounding. And I was like, that same air that we breathe, it cycles out. Somebody else breathes that in. They cycle it out. None of this air that's here is like really separate from us. It's like we're connected through our breath. We're connected beyond what we can like visibly see. So we're like infinitely connected. And then when we think on a molecular level, there's just like space in between our molecules. There's not this real separation that we think there is. Like really, when you think, even if you have to like think of like Ant-Man, when he like really gets small and he's like between particles of matter, there is literally just space, infinite space. So me being separate from Tiffany is just an illusion of my mind. These molecules only know space. There's no real separation. And when I think about our breath and sharing that over and over again throughout the world, I'm like, we are not that we are not disconnected.
That's
We
right.
are more connected than we understand. And that became a part of my spiritual foundation. This reemergence for myself is like, okay, how do I help people understand that we are infinitely connected and that that what happens to one of us happens to all of us. All of these things that we've talked about, but we haven't necessarily had the revelation in our hearts about.
So important. And I think for folks who are in some ways considered on the outside, right? For folks who are minorities, for folks who are part of groups where there isn't as much of a openness for some to say that we are one, right? It's like we are one in our heteronormative white, Christian church. That feels good. But as soon as we've got some drag queen outside, saying I'd like to come, then no, we're one, but you're not part of the one, right? And so for folks who are sometimes pushed to the outside, to really own that, to anchor that in as our truth, that regardless of us being pushed away sometimes, that we know that we are one, and that we can hold on to that truth and be an anchor for that, for those who aren't able to hold it. I think there's something really powerful in that.
Wow. Yes. Thank you for saying that out loud, that we are one.
Yeah, so as we wrap up, any final things y'all want to share? This has been so juicy. So many amazing. I mean, I have a list of stuff in my notes that I didn't get a chance to ask about because we just were in the flow, and I love the conversation that unfolded. But anything you guys want to put out there as we conclude?
This has been so great. Coming into the conversation, I'm like, oh, what are we going to talk about? Just really excited. And so I'm really glad we were able to have the conversation. And I just think ultimately we are, whether we realize it or not, all of us are so deeply spiritual. I think it goes back to your earlier point. It's whether we're willing to acknowledge it. I think that kind of activates it. And just really briefly, Mo and I made this post on social media that has gone viral, and people are still like commenting and liking it. Where we are talking about our version of a bedtime story. I mean, not a bedtime story, our bedtime prayer.
Yes.
And so Mo, says his prayer, which is,
now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take.
So this is the one he grew up reciting. And so for me, I grew up reciting, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Guide me through the starry night, waking me in morning light. And so we had a poll for many people to see what was your version. And I mean,
we're approaching 1 million views on this.
Wow.
But like over 50,000 comments.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes, so many people, you know, obviously saying that they grew up with Mo's prayer, but
If I
talking
die.
talking
Yeah.
about how traumatic it was, how difficult it was.
Mm.
Some people even
Mhm.
explaining how that instilled this fear of God that kind of really turned
Wow.
them away. And so I say
Mm.
all that to say that it is very apparent that there are a
Mm.
lot of people in this world who long for a spiritual connection, who,
Mm.
you know, are aware from
Yeah.
very early on as children how they wanted
Yes.
something they didn't get. They got fear,
Mhm.
they got all of these things
Yep.
that they didn't. And I just invite people into being creative, into just really leaning into where your heart leads you and where your
Yeah.
intuition leads you, and that
Mhm.
there's like no right way, like
Mm.
just no right way. Especially to our queer brothers, sisters, and siblings. Like
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
yeah, my heart is so open right now.
Mm.
Thank you
Yes.
for saying that out loud, Tiff.
Yeah. So
Uh,
good. Such a good
Yeah.
invitation. Thank you.
mhm.
Yeah.
Mm. Any final words for you, Mo?
I just want to leave people with an affirmation that they
Mm.
are love and they are
Mm.
loved. So you
Yes.
are loved and you are loved. And
Mm.
if you are in a space and time where you are feeling fear about whether or not you'll be accepted, I invite you to set this
Mm.
intention every day. And it's in
Mhm.
my phone. This is my intention every day is, and it says something like, regardless of what you do, regardless of what's going on, where you are, who you're
Mhm.
with, your goal is to just be loved. That's how you'll know you're
Mhm.
successful. That's how you know that your work is done.
Mhm.
Mm.
And I feel complete every time I go into any new situation because my goal is to be loved. If that's my intention, I can never be wrong.
Mm.
And so I invite you into that practice of setting that as your intention for every interaction, every day. And it's really changed my life in the fear that I feel just being my authentic self.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you for that invitation. Oh,
Yeah.
such good wisdom. And that feels like a beautiful note to end on.
Mhm.
You are love
Mhm.
and you are loved. Well, thank you
Mhm.
so much to both of you. This has been a total pleasure, a total joy.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Mm.